Well, welcome everybody to Anxiety Simplified. I am Joanne Williams, and I'm here to share some simple or simplified strategies that are very powerful that I've used with my clients as a 30-year mental health professional to lower anxiety. Again, simply that you can use anywhere, anytime to bring this, and we're going to bring this right into your home and car. How easy. And to make your life just a little bit easier and happier. So I have a really special guest today. I am so happy to interview. I'm really excited about this. Karese Laguerre. And she has a published book through Amazon, Accomplished. And I can't wait for you to hear more about it. She delves into how to sleep better. I think that's something we all really need, and to eliminate burnout. Karese will share with you today her unique way she's discovered to help people with the exact combination required to reach both and accomplish daily goals using facial muscles to help you achieve better sleep, breathing, and productivity. And I say, look younger. I don't know if she'll say that, but let's ask her that one. And in this patterning that she has found, it really can help solutions for grinding, snoring, jaw pain, tongue. Now my tongue is twisted, saying tongue thrusts and sleep disorders. So welcome, Karese. I think this is such an interesting field of airway dentistry and sleep. And I just feel like sleep is just such a huge issue that I'm really happy you're here for our listeners to really hear some of the techniques that you've learned and we want to hear more about. So welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So please tell us a little bit more about your story and how did this happen for you that you got into this not only the field but this kind of work in dentistry?
So it all kind of started with my children. And as a parent, I think we all know this similar journey where, something happens with your kids and it takes you on a whole different path you didn't even expect. But like many parents, when someone asks, hey, how's everything? How are the kids? Everything's great. And you talk about soccer or dance class or everything else that's going on and all the positives. But many of us have a lot of things that are underlying there. So we don't really talk about them much. I certainly was not talking about my son and his ADHD, his behavioral impulse control issues, my daughter at her we had a full myriad of sleep issues. You name it, she
Mm.
went through it probably a few times. Sleepwalking, night terrors, bedwetting, snoring, grinding. I mean, you name it, we had it. And it was a long journey for her with that, at least 10 years of that every single night. And then my other two had issues that I also wasn't talking about, where we were on like, my husband likes to say that we would have been better off with a keg of amoxicillin in our home because we were on a constant
You're on a
antibiotic.
drip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
constantly. The ear infections, the throat
Oh.
infection, it wouldn't stop. So there was a lot going on in my home. But like everybody else, who talks about all that? These things are childhood things and we're supposed to just overlook them, right? Well, in my primary field as a registered dental hygienist, I happened to be working with a pediatric dentist who was very deep in airway. And it was in talking to her that we kind of connected all of the dots that even though my children were going through various things, they all really stemmed from one, the way they were breathing, but two, the way they were using a lot of their oral facial muscles. So it's something that I never even thought about as a dental professional. But once I really dived in, I discovered that, wow, this is something that makes so much sense. Health really does start at the top.
And I've got to add in the psychological because how, and even that came into this. If I hear ADHD and some night terror. So there's some other issues even in there for your kids. Did the breathing and the facial muscles help those kinds of things too?
Absolutely.
Really?
Particularly with the ADHD, you'll find that ADHD is not something that you just go and you can have a blood test for, and they're like, oh, yes, definitively, it's ADHD. It's
Mm-hmm.
a symptom-based diagnosis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're looking at symptom-based instances, we have to look at where do things overlap. There's actually an over 70% overlap of the instances that do arise from sleep disorders in children and ADHD.
Really?
One you can take a definitive test for, you can have a sleep study and you can rule it out and say, okay, maybe it's not that, probably is more likely ADHD, but many, many times you'll find that these children that are suffering from sleep disorders, sleepy children aren't like sleepy adults. Sleepy adults, we get lethargic. Sleepy children, they get wired. They're more energized. Their body won't let them stop. They just keep going.
Acting out behaviors. And well, and I don't know if your son actually got the diagnosis, through testing for an ADHD, but or are you saying that maybe this acting out was defined in school with the symptoms of ADHD, but you're taking it back to sleep as part of the problem, or was the problem?
Sleep was definitely the problem in his
Uh,
instance. We had some
really?
years where we were fighting it, and from kindergarten, teachers were telling us that there was an issue, and it took us all the way to fifth grade to actually get a neurologist and to say, okay, maybe this is an issue. And then we fought having to medicate it, and eventually we did medicate him. But seeing the same neurologist, the same pediatric neurologist for years with him from fifth grade until about seventh grade, eighth grade, I want to say. At that point, once we notified her that, we were going to take him for a sleep study, that's when she said to
Go
me,
click.
oh, well, there is an overlap between these two, and that's probably something you should have done. Now, why didn't you
Thank
tell me
you.
years ago?
Yeah.
It's
So
something that is known about, but you have to often advocate for
I
yourself,
think
your family.
completely. I feel like anytime I would go, it was same with my children. I had to know what was already the problem and bring it into them to say, what can we do about it? I felt like I always had to be the diagnostician about it. And that's what it sounds like you had to be too.
Yes. And it's so bizarre because it really shouldn't be like that. But I think the
Right.
more you know, the more empowered you
All
can
right.
be.
I want to hear, what did you do then next for him for his sleep and ADHD? And then I want to get back to the dentist because it sounds like she's amazing as well. Or was that the next part of the story? I just want to hear the rest of the story.
Well, I dove deep into, the whole idea of, okay, breathing and oral facial muscles. What exactly does this have in connection with his
Okay.
problems that he's having with his sleep?
Okay.
So, when it came to that, essentially, when you are thinking about sleep, we have to understand that the first stages of sleep are when everything is starting to relax. Our body is relaxing, our muscles are relaxing, our soft tissue is not standing, nice and
Right.
taut against those musculature. Everything starts to relax. And there's a lot of soft tissue, a lot of muscles around your upper respiratory system. If you think
Up
about
in
your
your neck.
pharynx, yes, your esophagus, it's all covered in soft tissue, right? So as we lay back and our tongue falls back, and our tongue is very long, it's very important to know that your tongue can extend down by C6. Okay. So we're talking about, yeah, a very long tongue. If that falls back and all the tissues are relaxed, we're more
Ah,
likely to get what would be an apnea, that closing and that sealing of your upper respiratory system so that the air can't flow through. And then you have one of these things where you wake up and that gas is you actually opening it back up. That's you
or
tightening up.
snoring?
Snoring. I'm so happy you mentioned snoring. So snoring, and when people think about snoring, you think, oh, it's so common, or in kids, you think,
Right.
oh, it's
Everybody
cute.
does it.
I know. You have to think about what it actually is. So snoring is the sound of air meeting resistance going through your airway. Nothing about that sounds normal or cute at all. Air is meeting resistance as it's trying to enter your body. That's not okay. So that's going to have an effect on how much oxygen you're able to actually uptake and process. And if you're not able to
Uh-oh.
uptake and process enough oxygen, What does that mean for your brain function? What does that
Right.
mean for your cognitive abilities? That is definitely going to affect them in ways that do, manifest differently, but more often than not, it's going to affect your productivity, your critical thinking skills, and your impulses.
All right, let me ask this. So I'm thinking of a kid in school who's falling asleep. I'm tired. I
Mhm.
just don't get good sleep. I stayed up too late. But actually, it may not be that only thing, but it could actually be they're not getting good O2 oxygen to their brain. And then you go into the whole cleaning of the brain. I think that was brilliant in the book. And I'm telling you, this book accomplished. I'm going to put up, I know for everybody in the video, you're going to see this book accomplished, and it's got mountain, a blue, and but it's so important to read this whole thing because you take this onto so many levels. So, okay, we don't get enough O2, and then the productivity fails. And that's why you name the book Accomplished, because how are you supposed to accomplish things if you're tired? You don't have the energy, or you're not even getting your brain the good oxygen to clean it. So, is that what you really are meaning? And I hate to interrupt you, but that's what you're meaning by the accomplished as the title for your book?
Absolutely, absolutely. It impacts your next day. Your sleep is really the start of your tomorrow. So if you don't get a good sleep
Ah,
tonight,
that's a good one.
tomorrow, all messed up. And the brain cleaning, I'm glad you mentioned that
I
because
know.
that is actually the only time during restorative sleep, when we're in that REM, that our brain will actually eliminate its waste. So we have waste production for every other part of the body. We have a way to drain things, our lymphatic system. We're able to get rid of waste in our body. Our brain does not let go of waste unless we are sleeping, because our brain
Only?
is needed for every other function. We're needed. We need that brain moving so that we could move, so that we could think, so that we can actually be doing things while we are productive, while we are awake. When we're sleeping, our brain is like, okay, finally, we can rest, time to clean and to drain. So I like
And
to liken
so it does drain
it does
the
drain. It does
waste
actually drain waste fluid while we are sleeping. Yes, so it deposits
fluid.
memories. It's actually working and doing its biggest functions while we are sleeping. And so it's very important that we're able to get into that deep sleep and sustain it long enough. Because if you're having apneas, if you're not oxygenating properly, you're not going to cycle through your stages appropriately. You will spend a shorter duration in some, and you
Hmm.
might not even reach in some stages at all.
Wow. So just to tear that apart a little bit. So, and then if you don't have the drainage of the fluids while you're sleeping in the deep sleep, what are some of the symptoms that happens for people that, and you even mentioned about drugs, sleeping drugs don't even allow you to get into the REM sleep. And that's where it is that this happens, that the cleaning happens. And so
Absolutely.
if you don't get into that part of sleep, what are the symptoms the next day that somebody might feel if their brain didn't get cleaned?
You're going to feel very groggy. You're going to feel what
Groggy.
people would consider to be burnout. You will
Oh.
definitely have difficulty with your short term memory. So, if you've ever found that you're having
Hmm.
trouble kind of remembering, like, what did I eat for dinner last night? Or what did I wear yesterday? Your short term memory is going to be affected in a major way. You definitely will not be able to respond as quickly to things. So somebody might ask you a
Oh.
question, you have to process it just a little bit longer. Hey, what's two plus two?
Hmm.
Or that's definitely going to be a delayed response. So you're going to see things that are really obvious signs to people who might be outside of your own world, but while you're in your own body, you can't see it. But
Yeah.
others might say, I think it's very strange that your short term memory is that bad that you don't know what you had for dinner last night.
You know what happens to me? I hate to admit this, but if I don't get good sleep, I am like a different person. I am like aggressive in the sense like if the littlest thing goes wrong, it's just like I like attack. I mean, it's just like, who is this person? And I'll do things that are totally out of my character if I don't get good sleep. So even to me, it's almost like it's like I have to get good sleep, or and really I can't even be around people. So is that part of it, not cleaning
That's
good?
definitely part of it. You want to think of your brain on low oxygen or less
Low
oxygen, kind of
oxygen,
like your brain when you're
starved,
drunk. You want to think of
drunk.
it kind of like that. So a drunken mind, you're
Oh,
not processing things as fast as you would. Some people are angry drunk. Some people are emotional drunk. Some people might be tired and feel very like, oh, your brain is going to be functioning kind of the same way. You're not going to have those same ability to really restrain yourself. So whatever is your initial reaction to a stimulus is going to be a little bit supercharged, kind of like if your brain was on a drug.
that is fascinating. Like your well, and you think about it though, substances are a chemical or whatever you want to call it on your different systems, and they do react. And if we're not cleaning our brain, we have some substances in there that need to leave or they're affecting us. So just like if you're drunk, oh, that's just fascinating. And I in your book I read about benzodiazepines, which are this a lot of times the relaxers or things for anti-anxiety drugs like Ativan, lorazepam, a Klonopin. And you were saying, and a lot of people will take those because they can relax you to sleep. But you mentioned in the book that it actually doesn't get you into REM
It
sleep.
doesn't get you into REM sleep at all because it's more like a sedative. And sedation is not sleep. So while we liken it to that, because we don't really remember sleeping or when we're sedated, it's not the same mechanism of action. Sleep is actually a restorative process induced within in order to restore. Sedation is really just kind of taking everything down, but there's no restorative process happening.
That is interesting. And I remember in your forward, you said something like that. And that was really fascinating. Oh, well, here's that one thing in your physical barriers. Studies, this is where my studies and daily work is cross path with productivity. Ovens, washing machines, and our brains have a self clean feature. And I mean, I've never given that a thought before.
Oh, really? It's so
No.
interesting. We have so many other ways that we drain and we get rid of waste naturally in our body. Our brain has waste too. And it's definitely got to do a good cleansing. And the only time that happens is during restorative sleep. So if you don't reach restorative sleep, that's going to be not good. And imagine this from the perspective of a child now.
Mm,
So it's detrimental in two ways to children. One, if they don't reach stage 3, that's the only time that human growth hormone is secreted. So while they're in these critical stages, they're supposed to be growing. If they're not hitting good sleep and they don't hit stage 3, they don't get that human growth hormone, and then they're stunted in their growth, right? On top of that, now they're not in that restorative phase. That self clean isn't working
right.
on the brain. How are they going to do in school? How are they performing? How are they able to retain everything that they've been
No,
learning?
they
Their
can't.
education then becomes compromised.
Oh. Oh, and I'm going to add another one in there. Usually that affects your behavior. And then you can have some social consequences because you can't sit still and the teacher says, "Why can't you sit still and you need to do this or you're a bad kid." And it can make a whole nother syndrome start about self-worth or self-esteem or friendships. So I mean this is bigger than I've even ever imagined.
Oh, yes. And then those kids become adults. And so it all continues to compound. And
And I know this may sound like a funny question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Do you feel like we develop sleep habits starting as children?
I feel like you should develop good sleep habits starting as children. Unfortunately, not everybody gets into a good routine in the way that they should. And we do talk about to new parents very often, baby needs a schedule, baby needs a schedule.
Right, right.
And then as baby gets older, it becomes harder to keep that schedule. And you start getting all these different things in life, after school activities and different things that you're trying to introduce into your life and your world. And it's very important to maintain that routine because the body at any age, not just for babies, but for all of us, it really functions off routine. And if we're to talk
Really?
about our circadian rhythm, that's our greatest routine. That is our body really knowing when it's time to go down and to sleep and to hit that restorative phase, and when it's time to wake up and start our day. And so we've got to keep these routines. And so, as much as you can
Mm.
maintain your child in a routine, I know it gets difficult when they get older, teenagers, so forth, you kind of lose a little bit of the reins. As much as you can, keep them in that routine. That way, they develop these good habits later on and they're able to
Wow.
sustain better quality of sleep.
Well, and as you're saying that, I can even hear a component of depression. If people are not getting good sleep, they're foggy headed, they're falling asleep, they appear like they're sad or unresponsive in some way or off in space. And then they start thinking, well, I can't, I'm just whatever, and start, beating on themselves, so to speak, like I can't even learn or I can't even do things right. I can see that progression of the not sleeping, not cleaning your brain to be refreshed and active, and that slumping, down in your seat because I just can't even think straight, and then blaming yourself for it.
Absolutely.
Um, this is interesting. It's a different way for me to look at some of these things. It's almost like an important question then to be asking clients. And I always ask, but I never really paid a lot of attention to the whole process, because most people do not sleep well, is what I would say, at least 50%. Is that what is your understanding of the sleep percentage or issues with sleep with the general public, let's say? Do you know that?
As far as the general public, about 1 in 5 experiences poor sleep. And so I would say that that's going
20%.
to put us at, yeah, that's going to put us at about 20% of the population.
Hmm. My clientele is higher than that then. And again, their mental health, since I am a counselor. So, all right. Now, the other interesting thing I liked about your book was that you use the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we call it. And he's kind of the one of the psychologist that from old times, so to speak. But he had, these hierarchy of you can't get to another level of kind of important life achievement or functioning if you don't have, like, the bottom rung is just physical needs like sleep, but it's like water, food, air, shelter, but the basics. And then the next would go to safety and security, to love and belonging, to esteem, but and then self-actualization, my true purpose. But your kind of premise is physical needs at the very bottom. If we're not getting good sleep, it's really hard to even get to the next level.
Exactly. Exactly. It's very critical to make sure that your foundation is strong. It's just like a foundation for anything. If you wanted to build a house, you need a solid foundation. Otherwise, that structure will fall. That foundation of being able to breathe well, being able, let's just talk about breathing for a minute, because we can't
Yes,
do
please.
anything unless we're breathing. And that's just the end on that, is that, we can go for about a few weeks without food, maybe a few days without water, but mere minutes, if even for some of us, without air. So you have to be able to breathe.
Mm.
And not many people know that there's actually a way to breathe. So, one, we would like all breathing to be done through the nose. Okay, it's got to come through the nose because our nose is our natural oxygen intake specialist. Our nose is going to warm and moisturize and filter the air that is coming in, and it's going to prime it. That way, it is ready to bond onto the hemoglobin and really give us a really good quality of oxygen flowing to all of our organs and essentially our brain. Okay. We need that oxygen uptake. If it's not coming through the nose, it's going to be of poor quality and it's not going to bind as well. We won't get that nitric oxide that's going to help it really bond in there, which is
Wow.
going to impact everything, our cognitive function, our organ function, and so forth. There is a way to stimulate that nasal breathing, and that's happening in our mouth. Our tongue lightly suctioned up to the roof of the mouth, which, if we just think about it anatomically, the roof of our mouth is the floor of our nose. That's going to
Mm-hmm.
stimulate that nasal breathing. That's also going to stimulate our vagus nerve. Vagus nerve, so incredibly important for so many things, so many reasons. It's a wonderful nerve to study. I'm a big proponent of the polyvagal theory. And so I very
Yes,
much believe that,
me too.
you can be in that state of freeze. And that state of freeze very much mimics what you were speaking of earlier, that person that's just kind of in that depressive state where they feel like they just can't come out of it. They're unable to socially engage with the world. They're stuck in that fear. And that's going to create that next barrier of safety. So we can see how that foundation of breathing, and especially if it's not done right, can impact that next step, which is now our safety. Because now our autonomic nervous system
Yeah.
has no idea what's going on with the body. We're in danger. Something's going off. And so we've got to really start with the foundational floor, get our breathing right.
Oh, so important. And I've got to say, since reading your book, I've really noticed I do not breathe through my nose. And so I've really taken it on as a practice at night, especially, and of course, as I remember in the day too. But I what I noticed was that I'm a pretty good sleeper anyways, but I find that I feel like I slept deeper or I slept harder. It's just like nothing would kind of wake me up. I'm usually pretty a light sleeper. So I just felt like I definitely it helped me having a deeper sleep. Does that make sense for what you're talking about too, to deeper sleep?
Absolutely. That's what we want. We want you to be in those restorative states for a little longer, that deeper, that
Ah.
REM sleep. You're going to be in that state just a little longer. That's where all the
Ah.
restorative functioning is happening. You'll wake up in the morning, you'll feel a little better. You're like, this is different. It's the best way to sleep is to sleep and meet those restorative requirements. So it's not about how long you're in bed. It's not about, I slept
Mm.
8 or 9 hours last
Yeah.
night. How was the quality of that sleep? Not your quantity, but the quality.
That's interesting because a lot of people will say, you need this much. And if you don't get that, but I know in the book you really talked about a lot of the geniuses or the artists or the people of that didn't sleep much. And I think I've heard it lately, a conversation about that you really need to have at least 8 hours. And you're saying it's more the quality. And if you're breathing through your nose, that's restorative sleep is longer. You may need less sleep.
Yes, it is very possible. Now it's everyone's different, right? So it's very
Right.
possible that you can get restorative sleep in your 8 hours. It's also very possible that your 8 hours can be full of very short cycles and a lot of waking up
Mm.
and gasping or snoring and suboptimal conditions for your sleeping. So it's very important that we're focused on a routine that's going to get us to good
Ah,
sleep that's restorative.
interesting. And what about your tongue? How does your tongue? I mean, you talked about it kind of. Why is it, even as you sleep, should you put your tongue at the roof of your mouth?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We always want that tongue engaged with the roof of the mouth. So When the tongue, like I said, it goes down pretty far. It can go down to C6. When your tongue is down, or when it's just relaxed and it's not engaged in that light suction, because that light suction is going to pull it up and out of your airway. Okay. So you got to remember
Ah.
everything's connected, right? So it's going to pull it up and out of that airway and give you just a bit more room.
Oh,
Okay.
I see. All
Because we
right. So you're
need
saying
that.
pulling it up, you're making it, there's just more space in your throat. Oh, interesting.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
how do you see, and let's go back to your dentist, that TMJ, that big joint in our cheeks, I'll call it, or grinding or things like that. How does that all fit together?
These are bodily responses to your inability to optimally oxygenate. So when you're
Oh,
sleeping, and those people who say that they grind a lot at night, when you're sleeping and you're grinding at night, if you would just for a second just entertain me and just move your bottom jaw, your mandible forward, and then take a deep breath of air through your nose, you'll feel that you get a nicer bit of air. That's your body allowing you to open up your airway. So you're grinding to move that lower
ah,
jaw forward to get yourself more air. Because when that lower jaw is back, it's going to impede on the airway. So when we think about some of these appliances that dentists may give so that you sleep with that pull that jaw forward, it's just holding in place what your body is trying to naturally get
ah,
you to do, move it forward. Now, all of that grinding, and even if there is a tongue thrust during swallow, so a tongue thrust is that tongue pushing forward, either through the teeth or right against it to swallow, whether you're grinding or you're thrusting your tongue forward, what's going to happen is it's going to wear on the joint and the fluid
oh,
in that jaw joint. So that joint fluid starts to wear down. And then you have, imagine just like any other joint, there's no more fluid. Things start to get creaky. You get the clicking, the popping, the soreness because it's
interesting.
overworking that. Mm-hmm.
So will breathing and putting your tongue in through your mouth, breathing through your nose, and will that help to restore the proper fluid to that joint?
It can help to take off. So it can't ever
Pressure.
build back up. Yes,
It
but it
can't.
does take off that pressure.
Interesting. How interesting. Now, talk a little bit about the facial muscles because I found that really interesting because people are always interested in looking younger. And I know when I had work done on my teeth, 'cause I broke my front teeth off when I was like 8 years old. I mean, broke them right off and never had them fixed till I was 21.
Wow.
So affecting your whole, way that your mouth moves and everything, I think it probably affected a lot of different things I didn't know. My parents just didn't know any better. But when I had the work done, it made me look younger. And that's what he said. This will look like a facelift because it did. It because they made my teeth longer. And so they were more proper because your front teeth are supposed to be a little bit longer than your side ones. And it made my lip because I even had kind of a little bit of a crooked smile. And so it evened everything out as they did it. So I'm just wondering about is there facial muscle exercises that you recommend or just doing the breathing? Does that the facial muscles that will be helped by this? Or tell me more about the facial muscles.
So there's a certain harmony that we need our facial muscles to have because everything that's going on as far as your teeth and your jaw is going to be dependent on the soft tissue pressures around them.
Mm.
Okay. So imagine your cheeks and your lips as a sort of brace or gate, let's say, for those teeth. Because we know the teeth are always in constant motion. Anybody who's had braces and then saw their teeth start to shift back, you'll know that the teeth are always in constant motion. But what can be the
Mm.
true equalizer for them is the tissues that are around them. So we want those soft tissue pressures to be a positive force for really sustaining and not for pushing them in a negative way.
Mm.
We don't want the lips and the cheeks to be too tensious upon it. And we definitely don't want the tongue on the other end to have too much tension either, because one of these ways of forces have got to actually move the teeth, right? We like everything to be in balance. So that's where myofunctional comes in, where what I would do is I'm looking at the overall function. Where am I seeing the function? Which muscles? Because there's over 100 muscles in our oral facial complex.
Really?
Which one of these muscles is not up to par with everything else? What's overworking to compensate for the one that's not working well? And where can we create that harmonious balance? So it seems easy and simple, right? You're like, oh, you just do some facial exercises. But once you create that balance, it really does change the, I wasn't going to say the shape of your face, but it does change the way that your face looks. It's just like if you were to work out any other muscle of your body and
Right.
find your muscles to look more prominent, your face, your cheekbones, you'll get a little bit more development there. You will actually see a difference.
Ah. Oh, fascinating. I don't remember that in your book. Is that part of your CARE
Not
process?
directly.
No.
No, not directly. But the care plan that you're talking about does definitely get you into establishing better cycles of sleep and getting
That's
productivity
well. Tell us about
jumpstart.
that. What is
Yeah.
your CAR
So the
plan?
care plan is breaking down each of those letters. So C is for consistency, just like we talked about earlier with the babies and having an established routine. You really need to be consistent with your routine. When
Mm.
are you going to bed? We've got to define that into a certain time. Everybody has little things here and there that might throw you off, but you need a consistent time that you can stick to. Okay. Once you've established that, we need to secondarily start to develop a an airway plan. So we need to manage our airway. Okay. How do you manage your airway? One, remember, breathing is going to be happening primarily through your nose. Okay. As long as you are able to breathe through your nose, you don't have any sort of things blocking it or deviated septum or something that's in the way, it's physiologically stopping you from breathing through your nose, then we want to just make sure that we're keeping a clear and clean nose. So we're going to use a saline rinse or a neti pot, and we're going to cleanse the nose. And then it's really good if you're able to use some form of aromatherapy. Peppermint is one of my favorite. Eucalyptus is also another really good one. That's going to help to open up the nose and to get everything flowing through better. So you'll get better oxygenation coming through a clean nasal passage and a clear nasal passage at that point. You can also use like a nasal dilator or the breathe right strips over the nose to help keep it open at night. Okay. So your airway management routine, you want to get that going before you go to bed. So you created a consistent time when you're going to bed. You've made sure that you're establishing that routine. Prior to that time, make sure that you start your airway management routine. And then we go into our relaxation, because the very first steps of sleep are the body starting to relax, those muscles starting to relax. You have to give yourself a little bit of time to relax into the time that you're going into bed. So let's say I say 9 o'clock every night, I'm going to go into bed. I'm going to start my airway management routine probably an hour earlier at 8. That way, by the time that I'm done with that, I'm going to be ready to calm myself into bed. Whether that is me reading a book or whether that is me talking to my spouse and getting that time for the evening, whatever it is, I'm relaxing my way into bed and making sure that I am not engaged in active activity, because that's not going to help the body wind down. That's going to ramp you up. That's why they say not to work out prior to bedtime, right? The last thing is efficiency. So now that you've got yourself relaxed, you've gone into sleep, you're going to wake up feeling more refreshed. Optimize that, use that right away. Make sure you get out of bed, get yourself exposed to some good sunlight, because the morning has the most of the red in the red light spectrum of the sun that is coming down from those rays. Get yourself some sunlight. That is going to help jumpstart your mitochondria. That's really going to get you going. It's going to also give you a little bit of that serotonin and get you kind of just feeling good for the day. And then plan out your day. What are you going to do for that day? And you'll be ready to get it all accomplished because you would have had such a great night before. And lead into the next night with the same steps. So
Nice.
consistency, airway management, relaxing, and efficiency.
And, this really is a habit. And I think people resist sometimes changing their other routine and not understanding that efficiency that could be found if they could find a new habit. So I would really encourage listeners to seriously look at this. If you want to get more accomplished, then maybe you got to change your night routine. If did you know all this stuff? I didn't know all these things could really make that big a difference because burnout really is a problem, especially, in the regular corporate world. People may not be doing what they truly enjoy. And so this could really help. I bet they even think better, could be more creative, come up with better ideas or something like that if they get good sleep. Do you have any stories about, that other ways that sleep helps people be more creative or effective?
I have worked with a lot of different people. I will say that, yes, you are correct that the business people tend to be very productive, highly more creative. I will say, though, that working in the New Jersey area, working with some of the people in Broadway prior to COVID, that you will see that they are really able to flourish and shine. They can really step more into themselves, more into their characters. They're able to really just
Really?
bring out their best selves.
Huh.
So you've got to
It,
get a restorative night if you're
it
going to really
sounds
shine.
like they have more energy.
That,
Yeah.
amongst other things, right? More
Yeah.
energy, cognitive ability. There,
Right. Makes you feel better and you feel better about yourself and then you can present better. Really important information, Carice. And is there anything else you want to make sure you share with us and our audience about what you've done in this work? I think is fascinating. And before we close,
I think it's very important that everyone just knows that, not everything that is common is normal. So while you may have been living with a lot of the common things that we may have talked about today, that does not make it normal. And that it is okay to step into your best self because that's what I've truly found is that I have four different kids than I had years ago because now they're really flourishing. They are their best full selves. And it's so rewarding.
it's so good. And you have something to offer also our listeners?
Yes. So on my website, themyospot.com, you are able to go on there and you can book a free consultation. It costs absolutely nothing. We are able to talk and go over things that you might be experiencing, and then we're able to determine if myofunctional therapy is good and appropriate for you. And if it is, I'm happy to work with you. If it's not, I'm happy to refer you to someone who you might be a better fit for.
Oh, that's important. That's nice. And your book is accomplished, and we'll make sure we put in the show notes the actual link in Amazon, and because I think it's really important and it's really well written. I really enjoyed reading it, so I really hope people will get that. And I think they can help their kids. I didn't even think of it, and that I was thinking of myself. My kids are grown, but it's like, oh my goodness, we could help our grandkids or other people understand. You breathe through your nose. I mean, these really, really simple things that you shared with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. We really appreciate you being here, and please show your support by rating, reviewing, and subscribing to our podcast. And please share this. Share this with another parent or someone you think this could really help them in some way. And practice the skills. That's what I feel like always practice what we shared with you. These are life skills. Who doesn't want to accomplish more? So please practice these. Breathing through your nose, noticing where your tongue is. These are really important things that can actually make you have a better day. And you can always contact us at anxietysimplified.net and see the actual videos of this podcast there and learn if how to get an emotional support or psychiatric service dog. It to go anywhere with you, really to feel the reassurance that sometimes can help with anxiety. Bye for now.